is right ahead of us, and do not exit too early. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli. And our next speaker will be Robert Maurice, VP Service Research and Global Lab, IBM Research, which will speak about global trends. Robert, please.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much today. From what I hear, you've heard a lot of interesting things today about the general principles about innovation and how we can use some basic principles in innovation to accomplish our goals. And what I'd like to do today is talk to you about some of the key trends and very specific things that we're seeing in IBM around innovation. And those themes are quite concrete, not very general, but they very much focus on the kinds of markets that we see opening up. And so I want to tell you a little bit about growth markets, how we define growth markets and why we've shifted a lot of our trends to growth markets, and also about a huge change in IBM. IBM has undergone a huge change over the last 10 years, and I'd like to explain to you how we're adopting a very open model of innovation and encourage a partnership with you as we undergo that change. So first of all, on growth markets, many of you are very familiar with the amazing numbers and the huge changes that are being undergone in countries like China. And I can tell you, in IBM, we have reorganized our approach to markets. We have formed a growth markets unit which consists of all the countries outside of Western Europe, North America, and Japan. That leaves us with 149 countries. And we now run those 149 countries out of our headquarters in Shanghai. I recently moved to Shanghai, so I could be part of that. And we're finding amazing things. Just a couple of those are shown on the charts here. You know a lot about China, but you may not realize that $1 trillion is going to be spent in the Middle East in building basic infrastructure in the next 5 years. Africa has often been deselected by many countries as being unable to afford the kinds of things that many of us sell. But indeed, if you look at the middle class in Africa, which is often defined as having $3,000 or more to spend per year. And when you have $3,000, you can certainly afford a mobile. You can afford basic education and health care for your children. Africa will soon have a number of people in the middle class so defined which exceeds those in India. So it's moving very, very fast. A huge amount of spend around the world. And if you look at the raw numbers in these growth countries, you see some amazing figures. 100 million people moving to the cities every year, and in fact needing a mobile, needing education for their kids, basic health care. These growth countries constituting almost 6 billion of the world's population, and in fact having the majority of the world's GDP growth. Now, when we look at the kinds of things that we do in IBM and in information technology, it's very interesting. We see growth rates that are, we used to say 5 to 2, with the more recent estimates of GDP growth that we see coming from Europe now. It's probably more like 3 to 1. And if we look at information technology and the kind of information technology markets that IBM serves, we see 8% growth in the growth markets and 3% or less growth in the major markets. But something else that's very interesting, something we've tracked for years and we used as a kind of a rule of thumb, was that we would see countries spending about 2.5% of their GDP on information technology of the kind that we and companies like us produce. In the growth markets, they're only spending about 0.7%. And so there's huge opportunity as they move very fast to build this infrastructure to spend a much greater amount. So this morning we've already talked about innovation starting in growth markets. We heard a little bit about GE's innovation. I have an example there. Remarkable results that have been achieved by defining low-cost ultrasound products in the growth markets and then bringing those innovations back to major markets. We are finding the same things. There are many other interesting examples from other industries. For example, Medtronic and the creation of a pill-size pacemaker that was not created just because of cost. It was created because of lack of infrastructure, shortage of cardiologists that could interpret the data or tune up a pacemaker. Instead, they found a way of creating a pacemaker that instead of being inserted with a typical wiring for open heart surgery, could be inserted with a stenting procedure, which is a much smaller intervention. And rather than relying on local cardiologists who could tune up your pacemaker, they were able to connect this via your mobile phone to a cloud service which could have, in fact, the best practices, could accumulate all the data, and have a team of world-class cardiologists that could manage that data through a remote service. This was a way of dealing with a lack of infrastructure, as well as an opportunity to have a lower cost offering. Coca-Cola, the creation of $1 billion orange juice brand, a pulpy orange juice that was defined and found to be very popular in China and then rapidly spread to other markets. We find the same thing in information technology. A great example is a partnership that we have with Bharti Airtel. And the kind of thing that they would like to do, they want to move so fast that they don't have time to create and manage their own IT infrastructure. They actually outsource all of their IT to IBM, and they outsource all of their wireless technology to other companies. And by doing that, they're able to concentrate on the really important things, which is the building of their brand, customer acquisition, rapid expansion into new markets, and they're expanding into many other countries. That's a typical example of the kind of different buying behavior that we're seeing from companies in IT, and I see every day now in the growth markets. Companies don't want to be slowed down by assembling a bag of parts for information technology. They simply want to be able to get IT out of the way, and they don't want it to constrain their growth. They want to concentrate on their core competencies and grow, as opposed to being held back by the need to implement the infrastructure that other people have built by themselves. They want to buy it, they want to use it from a cloud, or they want to adopt it in some other interesting and rapid way. Many innovations are taking place like that, not just in the raw technologies that are being used and how they're being deployed, but in the buying behaviors and, in fact, the business models of the clients that are supplying those technologies. So I'd like to tell you about a few things that we've experienced in IBM, give you very concrete examples of technologies. I'm from the research organization. I run the global research labs. And as I said, we support that global model now out of the growth markets, even though we use our research labs around the world, including in our major markets, to support those innovations. So we're finding that things that we've done, the models that we've used in the past now have to be adapted in new and interesting ways. These are the kinds of things that IBM Research has done in the past. More than 30 years ago, we invented a relational database. But more recently, we've found, with a huge surge in data, that we had to invent something called stream computing. It wasn't enough anymore to work with data at rest. It was necessary to work with a different kind of data. So much data being created from new methods of sensing. And by the way, as the growth markets, as they install infrastructure, whether it's roads or bridges or healthcare systems, they install massive sensing capability at the same time. So it's necessary not just to deal with data at rest and try to mine that, but it's necessary to deal with data in flight and make quick decisions. And we refer to that as stream computing. We've been in supercomputing for a long time, and in the top left you see an example of a system we called Blue Gene, which, by the way, was driven from an experiment and a grand challenge that we did in the bottom right called Deep Blue, where we played chess and defeated the world the world champion in chess, Garry Kasparov, in 1997, we went on to create a machine called Blue Gene and passed the 10 to the 15 or petaflop barrier in computations. But one of the things that we found that's most exciting about that in recent years is not the traditional applications of high-performance computing, but something like Deep Thunder, listed just below Blue Gene, which is the ability to do weather prediction in a way that's more precise than ever before and more precise than what you see reported in the papers. Why is this needed? This turns out to be extremely important for offshore exploration of oil. It turns out to be extremely important for managing energy generation because you need to predict the flow within rivers, so you need to be able to predict how much you can get from hydropower and how much you have to generate from coal. And you need to create scheduling based on that. And it's also, we found very important, some of the growth market countries that we've gone into have been ravaged by natural disasters, of which there have been a huge number in the last few years. An example is Rio de Janeiro, which has suffered terrible floods and mudslides and the loss of many lives. Massive floods in Australia. And our ability to now provide solutions in those countries to governments requires a level of weather prediction and a granularity which is smaller than what is needed for other purposes. And in fact, very precise models about water infiltration, soil saturation, and soil mechanics that go far beyond what we've ever had to do before. Other examples in speech, we pioneered speech recognition, but only recently in growth markets have we come to realize that in order to address certain markets and solve certain social problems in India and Africa, where farmers who may be illiterate, they need to understand how to manage the dosing of insecticides or fertilizers in the field. They want to be able to call up not on a smartphone, they want to be able to call up on a very basic phone and to be able to use speech to query the kinds of insecticides that are effective. And we're working with partners in terms of putting out solutions which people can use purely with speech now to access information that's in the cloud. So our research labs, as I said, we are now operating our global research labs from Shanghai. I do that from my office in Shanghai. We're opening labs in new and important markets like Melbourne, Australia, which, by the way, although a developed economy, is also a tremendous growth market. Brazil, we make very good use of Haifa, which is our largest research lab outside the United States, and we continue to rechannel the energies of our global network of labs, which you see shown here, into solving the world's problems, and particularly where growth and rapid deployment of infrastructure exists. So what are examples of that? You'll see as I start to talk about these examples, a shift from a company, the IBM, that you may think of as a producer of hardware or of IT, raw information technology. You'll see our focus here on a shifting from the production of IT to the use of IT. For example, the technology that I talked to you about before, the moving from managing data at rest and mining a database at your leisure to accessing data in real time, has been extremely powerful, and in fact we've deployed to manage all the data coming off a censored infant, a prematurely born infant, and in fact discover the emergence of an infection, which is one of the most serious things that can happen to premature infants, to sense that hours earlier than would normally be possible in normal medical protocols. And we've been able to work with the Children's Hospital in Toronto and get much earlier interventions for infected newborn infants. We think this is just scratching the surface of the kinds of things that can be done with this real-time interpretation of data. Improving business performance, the high-performance computing that I talked to you about before, in weather prediction. It turns out, as we go deeper and deeper in deep-sea exploration of oil, and particularly as we begin to exploit the oil which lies beneath the pre-salt layer, we have to take much wider aperture recordings. And in fact, petascale, or 10 to the 15 floating point operations per second, is by no means insufficient, and our clients and our partners are already demanding exascale, which will have, in several years, 10 to the 18 floating point operations per second. And finally, on impacting society, I already talked to you about, for example, how we can use speech and communications to not just access the web through keystrokes, but talking to the web. These are the new kinds of examples that illustrate this shift from the production of IT to the use of IT to solve these world problems. But there's something else going on as well. Something else very fundamental that has changed the way we approach the use of information and the use of data in the world. We have gone through a radical transformation in the last 10 years in where we find data. And we've tracked for many years where the data is in the world. Data used to sit in databases. It used to be entered by keystrokes. It's now coming from instrumentation. We are more interconnected thanks to, obviously, the internet and thanks to mobile communications, which we all carry. That data is available from anywhere. It can be used from anywhere. It's coming from sensors, and it's coming from the universal sensor as well, which is the human who holds one of these mobile devices. And finally, if we have that data, we're finding we can use it in new and unanticipated way to do things that actually we never thought were possible. That data takes place in all kinds of forms. It takes place in numerical forms, traditional numerical and structured forms, but it also takes place in very, very unstructured forms. It takes form in the form of pure text, language, blogs, Twitter feeds, etc., and all of the written information that's out there, of which much is not reliable. A lot of that data is in doubt. We like to say moving from data at rest to data in flight to data in doubt. You all know how unreliable a lot of the information on the internet is. So we surprised ourselves less than a year ago when we had set out about 4 to 5 years before to do the next great challenge. The Deep Blue chess machine was very interesting, but it was totally computational, and it relied on very structured data and a very structured game. We decided, a lot of people thought we were crazy, to actually try to compete in a quiz show. And many of you may have heard of this game, the Jeopardy, which is the most popular quiz show in the United States. It's also licensed in several other countries around the world. But it's also a very hard show. I'm always embarrassed by how poorly I do when trying to answer the trivia, because it's not just trivia, it's facts. And Jeopardy asks very deep and hard questions about politics, geography, science, sports, movies, and I'm afraid I know very few of them. And yet there are these remarkable people like Ken Jennings on the left and Brad Rutter on the right, who are amazing walking encyclopedias that have huge encyclopedic knowledge. So we decided not just to play the game as we played against the world chess champion, but also the #1 and #2 champions in the world, the people who had been most successful. And I had the great opportunity of meeting these two gentlemen and realizing that they are really incredibly exceptional, computers in a box, right? We surprised ourselves. We were able to, this is the last game, we were able to actually do better at answering very general questions. Many of these questions were trick questions involving puns and involving connections between two very, very different fields. And we were able to do better, and Ken wrote a comment, a funny comment at the bottom. I, for one, welcome the new computer overlords, as he gracefully admitted defeat to this machine. It was a remarkable experiment, and the kind of thing that's indicative of the new kinds of things that we're doing. And after doing it, we were, of course, very excited, and then we went into a period of disillusionment when we said, can this thing only play game shows? And then as we began to work with the area that we chose first, which was healthcare, we began to realize the excitement that physicians who are under incredible overload of information, whether it's from family history or the huge medical literature or the huge amount of data that they have to look at in the medical records, and we began to realize that if we could extend this tool, not just to reason with written knowledge, but also to reason with labs, and reason with a history that would be connected from a patient, that we could help to overcome, and we could help clinicians to overcome this kind of overload of information, which we all live with today. And so we're now moving to try to apply this technology to the problem of a clinical diagnosis and a treatment. So what does this mean for our model of open innovation? We're actually working with partners now on these kinds of technologies, all the technologies. that we've talked about, and we thoroughly believe in the concept of open innovation. So we are using technologies that come from open source. We have been very, very strong supporter of Linux and Eclipse and many of the other things there. Of course, we still are in the business of providing hardware, but to a greater and greater extent, our hardware now runs all kinds of open source technologies. And we also make available components which can be combined, and in fact, in many cases, we take both open source and proprietary components from startups. We combine them into our solutions, but more importantly, we make our components available to other people. Startups we have many partners here in Israel and many other countries that we now partner with in a very open innovation model to create solutions. For example, Infosphere Big Insights is predominantly built on open source technologies. It's predominantly built on Apache Hadoop. It uses Jackal as an interface language. It's available free for download from IBM. And of course, if you would like to, we provide free software. We also provide some proprietary technologies. If you'd like to use our database or our WebSphere technologies to interface, we also have some proprietary technologies that it interfaces with, and it will also interface with your proprietary technologies. So we very much moved from a closed model 25 or 30 years ago to a very open model. We thoroughly support open interfaces, and we want to be part of the vibrant kind of ecosystem that I see every time I come to Israel. An example of this, composing for value. Recently, we have undergone we've seen a huge surge in interest in integrated operating models. And something we refer to as the Integrated Operations Center, which uses several of our basic technologies like database and event management, but also to a very significant extent uses ISV technologies and third-party technologies to provide. One example is we run a center now in Rio de Janeiro which manages the flood and mudslide disasters that we talked to you about before. But very interestingly, as soon as we put that in, we found that it started to be used for everyday use. Last time I was in this center in Rio de Janeiro, it was being used that day to manage the aftermath of a garbage strike and also simultaneously a jackknife trailer truck on one of the main bridges in Rio. So you may build something for one purpose and you quickly find you want to load onto it all kinds of third-party technologies that can help you to solve a broader range of the world's problems. So finally, I'd like to introduce to you our partner in open innovation here in Israel and in the rest of the world, our Global Technology Unit partnership model. It's something where we actually like to go to market together and become a participant in this open innovation model. We are happy to provide both our open source technologies and our proprietary technologies that can be licensed with IBM. We're happy to brainstorm with any startup or any company, any other company, large or small, that would like to talk about synergies with the kinds of things that we've just talked to you about doing, and work on business plans and work on going to market together. Nobody is a monolith anymore. And we'd also like to help companies that have viable and interesting and important products that can help to solve the world's problem to work with us and come with us to our clients to solve problems together. I've left a contact for you if you'd like to participate in this model and interact or even just brainstorm with us about possibilities in this exciting world of growth markets. Vova Soroka, who's here at the meeting today, and his email address is there. And we look forward to working with you on this new model and using data to solve the problems of the world and to change the world. So thank you.